For a moment, the situation on Celanese side was not very good. However, what was surprising was that Celanese people mainly used the idle people to discredit Jiang Hai, or to say that Jiang Hai would never leave. Other than that, they did not do anything else. It was not until the afternoon that Augustine Wilson stood up. According to him, the reason he brought Celanese people over was that he had worked in the factory before. He knew that the factory met American standards and would not pollute the environment. After all, this was his home. However, he did not want any irreconcilable conflicts between Celanese and Jiang Hai. Therefore, he decided to talk to Jiang Hai personally and persuade him not to leave. He also wanted to let Celanese move in. After he stood up, a lot of people supported him and followed him to Jiang Hai's place. For a while, he became a positive figure. It's true that when the forest is big, there are all kinds of birds. He even became a leader. But unfortunately, they were given the cold shoulder because Jiang Hai wasn't in the manor today. Huang Yunfei and the others hadn't left yet. Jiang Hai naturally wanted to accompany them to play. Anyway, his attitude had already been made clear. As for whether they believe it or not, it's up to them to decide. At most, he would sell the manor and take the cows and his fish to other places, although it would be troublesome. But now, Jiang Hai had the ability to go wherever he wanted. This was his greatest ability. When these people came to visit, Jiang Hai was at Old George's horse farm, leading Fu Yuan and the others to ride horses. Originally, there were horses in Jiang Hai's manor, but after all, there were now many cows in the manor. People like Robbins Garcia had to take care of the cows. There was no one to teach Fu Yuan and the others how to ride horses. There was also no one to take care of them. Instead of causing trouble in the manor, it was better to come to Old George's horse farm to play. Looking at Jiang Hai, Old George had obviously received some news. "Jiang, you're not really leaving, are you?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was tired from riding and resting, Old George walked over and handed over a bottle of drink. Then he said to Jiang Hai with some worry, "If the chemical plant is not built, why should I leave? I still like this place. It can be considered my home. But if that chemical plant is built, then I will have to leave." After taking a sip of the Coca-Cola that Old George handed over, Jiang Hai burped and said to Old George seriously, This why? The chemical plant is not in your way. Why do you have to leave?" Hearing that Jiang Hai was really leaving, Old George could not help but be a little excited. After all, his horse farm originally relied on selling horses for a living. Although it was not to the extent that he could not survive, his life was not too rich. But since Jiang Hai brought the tourists from Wuxia, this was the first time he knew that he could make so much money by letting people ride horses. The money he earned in the past 2 months was more than what he earned in a year by selling horses. Now that Jiang Hai was leaving, his heart was cold. "I can tell you. You also know that the cattle in my manor are very good." "What?" "It's mainly because of the environment. My manor does not allow a little bit of pollution. If there is a little bit of pollution, the quality of the cattle in my manor will be greatly reduced. So if this chemical plant enters Winthrop, I can only leave." Looking at Old George, Jiang Hai thought for a while and made up a lie. There are some things that he can't say directly. Dragon balls, scales, aura, these things they can't understand. Not to mention that he doesn't want to be cut into pieces for research. But it's a good idea to talk about cattle. This is also the explanation that he thought for a long time last night. And this explanation is also very persuasive. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Old George couldn't help but say, "Oh. Indeed, Jiang Hai wants to make money by relying on Winthrop, but how much money can Winthrop make for him? 18 million a year? That was all there was to it. His main source of income was still his manor and his ranch. If Jiang Hai's Soaring Dragon Manor is destroyed because of the chemical plant, then Jiang Hai's gains really don't make up for the losses." When Jiang Hai said this, Old George also believed it. This explanation is indeed reasonable. But what chemical plant? Didn't they say that they won't pollute the environment? At this time, Old George's heart was already biased. For him, Jiang Hai's existence is very important. If the contradiction between Jiang Hai and that chemical plant is irreconcilable, then he will definitely stand by Jiang Hai's side. This can be seen from his new title. "There is a chemical plant that won't pollute the environment?" Hee, whether you believe it or not, I don't believe it." Shrugging, Jiang Hai said calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Old George, who has experienced the United States Civil War, couldn't help but laugh. He remembered the lies that the American government had told him when he was very young in order to develop the country. Chemical plants won't pollute, mines won't pollute, the West is full of gold. For these American civilians, the credibility of the United States government is just that. In this way, another person joined Jiang Hai's camp. But they didn't notice that at this time, in a corner in the distance, A white man also heard Jiang Hai's words. After hearing Jiang Hai's words he frowned, then walked to the corner and took out his mobile phone. Not long after, Peter, who was still examining Winthrop, received a call from above. After learning that the news released by Jiang Hai was true, his eyes narrowed. Chapter 608. Are you really okay? Why don't you come back to China with us first? Standing outside the airport, Su Wei couldn't help but worry about Jiang Hai. Indeed, in his opinion, Jiang Hai's situation is really not very good. Don't worry, this is my home. Will I have any problems? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled and said indifferently, You are so stubborn. Well, do as you see fit. Looking at Jiang Hai's indifferent look, the three people here couldn't help but sigh. Even Huang Yunfei's wife, LV Jiao, was much quieter at this time. In the days they stayed here, they watched Jiang Hai's words slowly change. From the first day they came, Jiang Hai was almost the most dazzling star in this town. Today, when Jiang Hai drove them to the airport, the people on the road would subconsciously avoid Jiang Hai. It was impossible for them to directly clash with Jiang Hai because Jiang Hai was not a saint or a person who only chased after the leader of the evil. If you dare to provoke him, you will be skinned alive. This is Jiang Hai's style. So although they were alienated, no one dared to come here to provoke him. At most, they just stayed away from him. Well, get on the plane. Send me a WeChat message when you get home. This time you came to play, I didn't expect to encounter such a thing. It's really bad luck. Come again when you have time. I will treat you well. Looking at the slightly tangled look of several people, Jiang Hai patted them on the shoulder and said goodbye to them one by one. Isn't it enough to carry it out properly this time? My circle of friends is about to explode. Every day, abalone, lobster, sea cucumber, beef, those food, to be honest, I guess I will think about it for a long time when I go back. And these things I bought, buddy, they're all great. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Huang Yunfei couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. To be honest, he was very satisfied with this honeymoon trip. In fact, not only him but his wife was also very satisfied. Although she had not seen too many famous historical sites, there were not many women who were interested in those things. She cared more about going shopping and eating these delicacies. To be honest, in her opinion, Jiang Hai's place was really too perfect, if not for those trivial matters. Alright, hurry up and go through the security check. I'll look for you guys when I go back during the new year. Looking at the reluctant look on everyone's faces, Jiang Hai smiled and urged them to hurry up and board the plane. These people were also very reluctant to leave Jiang Hai's place. Of course, it was also possible that they were reluctant to leave Jiang Hai's food. They helplessly waved their hands and walked through the security check. Of course, they had a lot of luggage, but they had already handled the transportation. This time, when they came to Jiang Hai's place to play, each of them brought back a lot of things such as maple syrup, American ginseng, all kinds of clothes, shoes, trinkets, and so on. They bought a lot. Let's go, we should go back too. Seeing these people walking through the security check, Jiang Hai also said to the people behind him. At this time, it seemed that there was no one behind him. If someone heard Jiang Hai's words, they would probably suspect that he was sick or saw something that he shouldn't have seen. But Jiang Hai didn't care. When he turned his head, a woman wearing a baseball cap appeared on his side, carrying a box in her hand, wearing a pair of huge sunglasses, chewing gum. Looking at Jiang Hai walking over, she couldn't help but twitch her mouth slightly. How did you know I was here? Looking at Jiang Hai, the beauty took off her huge sunglasses, revealing a rather delicate face. Jiang Hai was very familiar with the owner of this face, Azalina Vicabrio. The glasses were given to Delina by Prawalton. The top is Bernice's, the bottom is Paige's, the earrings are Ohilia's, the shoes are Janice, and that bag is mine. Looking at Azalina, Jiang Hai said calmly. I didn't expect your memory to be so good. Young man, do you want to learn how to cook from me? Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina smiled and approached him, then took the initiative to hold Jiang Hai's arm, but her words only got a supercilious look from Jiang Hai. Since the night Jiang Hai came back, in fact, Jiang Hai found that Azalina's situation was not right. He didn't see her that night. After learning that she was not feeling well, he went to see her the next day, only to find that she was not in the period when relatives came to visit her. Then she told Jiang Hai that in fact, these days, someone had been observing Jiang Hai's manner. And she was secretly watching that person to see what was going on with him. After learning this, Jiang Hai didn't care about her. Jiang Hai knew that if he went out today, Azalina would definitely follow him quietly. This was also Jiang Hai's confidence. Just now, when he saw a familiar figure, Jiang Hai knew that it must be her. How's the situation recently? Walking out of the airport with Azalina, Jiang Hai asked as they walked towards the parking lot. They haven't done anything recently, but they are still looking for people to slander you. But boss, when did you become so timid? Could it be that what they said was true? So that you can't refute it? Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina asked curiously. These days, Celanese company had not been idle. Every day they sent people to talk bad about Jiang Hai in town. Sometimes, a lie would be true if it was told 100 times. In recent days they had been slandering Jiang Hai more than 100 times. It was precisely because of this that Jiang Hai's reputation in Winthrop was also badly damaged, very badly. But Jiang Hai acted as if he didn't know. Originally, they thought that Jiang Hai Lai was going to say something or make concessions. But now it seems like that wasn't the case. Yeah, why don't you let the chemical factory enter? This is a good way to increase income. You can't prohibit us from making money just because the chemical factory will pollute your manor. We also need to make a living. Finally, a young man was persuaded by these people and joined the ranks of these people. He looked at Jiang Hai on the stage and said loudly, "Oh, he took the bait." Listening to this voice, Augustine lowered his head and couldn't help but show a smile. This is what he wants. There is no point in just instigators like them. They want to make Jiang Hai fall into the sea of people's war. Did you hear that? Jiang Hai? It's not that we are against you, but you can't let the town fall into a situation where there is no money to make because of your own reasons. Today it's the chemical factory, you don't let us build it. Tomorrow there will be other factories, you won't let us build it. You are cutting off our way to make money. I remember there is a saying in Wuxia that cutting off people's way to make money is like killing their parents. You are really too cruel to do this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Augustine stood up and shouted at Jiang Hai with a face full of excitement. People like you can't represent Winthrop and you can't block the way of the townspeople. Jiang Hai, you should get out of the way. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was still very calm, Augustine shouted loudly. Get out of the way. 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 With Augustine's words, the punks below also began to quarrel loudly. Hearing their words, many townspeople also joined in, and for a time the square was filled with shouts. But among these people, there were many who stood firmly by Jiang Hai's side. Looking at these people, Jiang Hai smiled. It seemed that he was not the enemy of everyone. In fact, even if he was the enemy of everyone, he didn't care, not to mention that he wasn't. Hey, it seems to be working well. At this time in a nearby block, the people of Celanese were gathered there. Looking at the square in the distance and listening to the deafening sound, Peter couldn't help but chuckle. He really didn't expect it to be so effective. He originally thought that Jiang Hai's reputation here was very stable, but now it seemed that it was just SOSO. The voices are getting louder and louder. Jiang Hai's self-confidence has been shattered. This damn guy, he shouldn't be able to stop us this time. Hearing the words of the boss next to him, another person of Celanese couldn't help but whisper. The employees of Celanese behind them looked at this person with a trace of worship in their eyes. They really didn't think that this matter could be solved so easily. They could only say that their boss was indeed their boss. Chapter 6:11. You bastard, I'll kill you. Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, the hooligans' minds buzzed. Now, no one doubted the strength of Jiang Hai's words. If Jiang Hai said in front of everyone that they couldn't buy anything, then they really couldn't buy anything. Especially at this time, the only thing they could do was to leave Winthrop, and that was all. Jiang Hai was going to kill them all. Immediately, many people went crazy. They screamed and pounced on Jiang Hai, who was on the high platform. Connerson Peters, who had been standing behind Jiang Hai, grinned. He had been waiting for this scene all night. Looking at the few people who pounced on him, Connerson screamed and pounced on them. He punched the biggest guy who had been shouting the loudest and sent him flying. His face was deformed in an instant and he even lost a few teeth. He lay on the ground, unable to move. Seeing that Connerson had actually attacked, the other hooligans did not hold back either. They screamed and pounced on him. Unfortunately, how could they be a match for Connerson? What's more, now that the townspeople had calmed down, they definitely wouldn't provoke Jiang Hai because of them. The women immediately retreated and so did the old man. However, the brawny men didn't care about the fact that they were from the same town. They went up and caught a lot of people. Only 2 or 3 people ran to Connerson. Connerson wasn't polite to these people who came from 1,000 miles away to deliver their heads to him. He punched each of them until they couldn't stand up anymore. Although these hooligans were usually good at fighting, they were far inferior to Connerson, a black boxing master, when it came to fighting strength. They couldn't get up in an instant as they lay on the ground. Take these troublemakers away. At this moment, Sheriff Maris Smith, who had been sitting behind Jiang Hai, also stood up and shouted. The police who had been maintaining order here rushed over and took away these troublemakers. They had always been standing firmly behind Jiang Hai. You are helping the tyrant. You will not have a good ending. Jiang Hai is a dictatorial bastard. He controls the town's economy. Sooner or later you will regret it. The townspeople will not be your slaves. Looking at Augustine Wilson, who was still shouting loudly after being taken away, Jiang Hai could not help but twitch his mouth. The reason why he was not worried when all kinds of news spread in the town was because he had enough trump cards. The relationship between him and the town was not an equal cooperation, although it was a win-win situation. He could make the town prosperous, but he could also destroy the town directly. This was Jiang Hai's ability. As long as he showed his attitude, these rioters in the town would be stunned. Because no matter how stupid they were, they knew that they could not let Jiang Hai go. Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. He was born to like these fierce animals, especially when these big cats were acting cute. It was really quite strange. Okay, you guys live here. What's the situation with the water gloom? After patting these guys' heads, Jiang Hai looked at the water gloom in the distance. He remembered that this guy brought him here. It seemed that the mountain lion family didn't have any hostility towards the water gloom. This made Jiang Hai a little hesitant. What's going on? Maybe it felt that Jiang Hai was looking over. The water gloom swam to the side of the waterhole at this time and looked at Jiang Hai. Then it used its tail to whip the water surface of the waterhole twice. Then a huge figure floated out of the waterhole. When he saw this figure, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gasp because the figure that floated out of the waterhole was none other than a huge crocodile. He had to admit that when a crocodile rose from the water, especially from the very turbid water, it was even more terrifying than the water gloom above his head. Looking at this guy floating up, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gulp. However, after this crocodile floated up, it didn't move when it saw Jiang Hai. Instead, it looked at Jiang Hai with its emotionless eyes and slowly climbed out of the water. It looked at him from afar, just like the water gloom. This scene seems a little familiar. Looking at the crocodile and the water gloom standing there, Jiang Hai's brain suddenly seemed to stop working. A scene suddenly emerged in his mind. The crocodile and the water gloom, two creatures that shouldn't have appeared here, appeared in front of him. This made Jiang Hai a little confused, but the moment the scene appeared in his sealed memory, Jiang Hai remembered them. In that wild animal warehouse. Oh my god, it's you guys. Looking at the appearance of the snake and the crocodile, Jiang Hai instantly slapped his head. He suddenly understood why Little Yellow, Little White, and Chirps didn't make any movements at all. Instead, it was as if they didn't see them at all. Jiang Hai looked at the snake and crocodile. Also, why did the snake and crocodile coexist peacefully, and why was the mountain lion here? There was only one answer: spiritual energy. Animals were much more sensitive than humans. Although Jiang Hai didn't know how these two guys escaped, after escaping, they clearly found Jiang Hai and felt that the spiritual energy in Jiang Hai's place was different from other places. The reason why they coexisted peacefully was because they felt the familiar feeling in each other's bodies. It was precisely because of this that the three of them were in the forest, and the water gloom led Jiang Hai here after seeing him. It's you guys. Letting go of the small mountain lion beside him, Jiang Hai walked in front of the two big guys and touched their heads hard. However, snakes and crocodiles are cold-blooded animals after all. Feeling the cold wind blowing around him, Jiang Hai also took a deep breath as he looked at the grassland and cornfields in the distance. Logically speaking, the corn should have been harvested last month, but that wasn't the case. The people who planted the corn would leave some corn in the field. The more mature the corn became, the harder it would become. Humans couldn't eat it anymore. Of course, the corn wasn't for humans to eat. They were prepared to harvest it before the snow, break it into pieces and feed it to the cows. Jiang Hai didn't plant corn in his manor, but it didn't mean that he didn't know about it. After driving for about 10 minutes, Jiang Hai had already arrived at Old George's horse farm. At this time, there were many cars parked outside Old George's horse farm. Most of them were pickup trucks and there were also some motorcycles and cars, but they were obviously not of high grade. As soon as Jiang Hai's car came, it attracted a lot of people's attention. Especially those young people who were making a bonfire in the small courtyard of the horse farm at this time. This is Jiang Hai's car. Why is he here? Jiang Hai's car was still very famous in the town. At that time, many young people recognized that it was Jiang Hai's car. Especially the owner of the horse farm, Old George's daughter, Delia ran out directly. "Hi Jianghai, why are you here?" When she ran out, she just saw Jianghai getting out of the car, so she asked excitedly, "Haha, am I not welcome?" Hearing Delia's words, Jianghai smiled and went forward to hug her, then said jokingly. Hearing Jianghai's words, Delia couldn't help but punch Jianghai coquettishly. "This guy is really something. I called your dad last night and said that there was a charity here, so I came to take a look." After just a light hug, Jianghai let go of his hand and then said to Delia with a smile. Hearing that Jianghai and her father had already talked on the phone, Delia couldn't help but blame her father. He didn't even tell her that Jianghai was coming, really? Coughed Delia, this is. Just as Jianghai and Delia were talking here, a white young man came over and looked at Jianghai and asked with some doubts. Hearing his words, Jianghai also looked up at him. Jianghai was not familiar with this white young man, and he didn't know him. It was very likely that he was from outside the town, and from the way he looked at him, he should have a special relationship with Delia. "Let me introduce you. This is Jianghai. The soaring dragon manor in the west is his. It's a big guy. This is Baveda Jindaro, my boyfriend." Seeing the two meet, Delia introduced with a smile. "Hello." Hearing Delia's words, Jianghai also stretched out his hand and shook the man's hand. However, Jianghai could see that when this person heard that he was just a farmer, there was some pride in his eyes. In fact, this was also a kind of human inferiority,